Hello, and welcome to our second week on the theme of Faith in Science for Awakened. It is absolutely ridiculous that so many American Christians have turned their backs on science, denying basic facts that we know to be accurate, simply because those facts challenge a particular worldview. We ought to allow the facts to influence the way that we see the world, instead of allowing a set of preconceived notions determine which facts we're going to accept and which we are going to deny. For instance, we know that the Earth came into being over the course of several billion years and that evolution is a reality. Denying that fact simply because we have read an ancient story that says the world was created in 7 days is not only ludicrous, it's also inauthentic to the original meaning of the story, which was never meant to be taken literally. God gave us brains for a reason, and we ought to use them. We see that thinking is a deeply spiritual practice throughout the biblical text, but we can certainly see it in Jesus' life and ministry. The very fact that he taught using parables is evidence of this. Jesus taught in such a way that he wasn't just giving people the answers, but he was inviting people into the conversation by engaging in the spiritual practice of thinking about what those parables mean and about how they applied to their lives and, of course, to our lives as well. But more than that, we know that Jesus valued thinking because he told us when he was asked. Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment is, and he said, actually, there are two. It's to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And he didn't come up with either one of those. They're both quotations from the Hebrew Bible, except that first commandment that he names, he makes an addition to. This is something that I point out in this week's reflection, that Jesus adds the words, your mind. Love God with all your mind. That's an addition that Jesus makes to that litany of how we are to love God, and I don't think it was accidental. Jesus knew that if we really wanted to love God, that if we really wanted to bring about the reign of God on this earth, that if we really wanted to change this world, that we had to love God with all that we have and all that we are. It meant that we had to love God not only with our hearts, but also with our minds. One of the most faithful things that we as Christians can do in the 21st century is to show that Christian isn't by its very nature anti-science or anti-intellectual, but instead, Christianity that is authentic to the original teachings of Jesus is one that deeply engages with the questions, that is a curious faith, that wants to know more, that wants to grow deeper. And so in that spirit, this week's spiritual practice is to engage in a bit of thinking and a bit of reading. This week, I encourage you to think about some new scientific discoveries, something that has been discovered recently. If you engage with a scientific journal on a regular basis, you can go there. But for most of us who probably don't do that all the time, perhaps you can just go on Google and Google recent scientific discoveries. And make sure this is from a reputable source. Make sure you're looking at something from a scientific organization, but allow yourself to sit down and read and digest the information, and then to ask what that means for your faith. So for instance, as I was looking up recent scientific discoveries, I found out that in August of 2024, scientists at NASA have discovered that there is liquid water on Mars. It's several miles beneath the surface, but there is liquid water on Mars, which means that it is possible that in the past or even present that there is some sort of life on Mars. Now, much of Christianity often holds that we as human beings are special, that we are unique in this entire universe. And it may be, in fact, I think likely, that in this unfathomably large universe that there is other life, and certainly life that looks different than human beings. So what does it mean for our view of God if human beings are not as unique as we think we are? That we are not the only reasoning beings in the universe. To me, that means that perhaps the notions of God that we have are somewhat inadequate, or at least somewhat small. That God is larger, that God is more expansive than maybe we've ever even imagined. This week, look up some scientific discoveries. Allow those facts to inform the way that you think about God and this world and even the universe. And try not to let what you already think influence the way that you think about the facts. May it be so. Amen.